Do you think there's a possibility that at some point in the future, I don't want to get too hopeful about how soon, we would not have a conversation at least 3 times a week on this show about the sodding Rwanda policy?
I can't remember a time before the Rwanda policy.
What,
at this point. What did we do? What did we have to talk about before it? But I mean, you were saying earlier that it's been 4 months trying to just get this particular bill through Parliament. Obviously, this
is like an addendum to the bill.
Exactly, it's 2 years old as of this month. It's taken this long.
And this is emergency legislation that took over 4 months.
This is crazy. I mean, this Rwanda plan is on its 3rd Prime Minister. There's been wars which have commenced since it actually came in. I mean, this is something which has really demonstrated, I think, and yet everyone still kind of knows that it won't make any difference.
This is the thing. I mean, the one thing that's uniting left and right in this country right now is that no one thinks this bill is going to work. And yet it's this flagship bill. This is all about this flagship policy. It's going to make a difference. I mean, we had 5 ping-pongs between the Commons and the Lords, and eventually on the last 2 amendments that the Lords were holding out on. Interestingly, actually, it was a crossbench peers, not Labour peers, who were holding out on them. They basically gave up and left the primacy of the House of Commons and elected accountable MPs to have the final say. But
how nice of them.
I know, well, that was nice, wasn't it? But 8 hours of debate last night, just after midnight, the actual final decision was made. It's not going to be ping-ponged anymore. Still got a few more days until we get royal assent. Now, bearing in mind that King Charles, a couple of years ago, was privately, apparently, talked about how the Rwanda scheme was appalling. So he's not going to be signing that with any great joy. I don't think it's appalling, but I do think it's pretty unworkable, and I know it won't work as a deterrent. I mean, amazingly, loads of news today reporting, very, very sad news, 5 migrants, including a 4-year-old girl, have died during an attempt to cross the channel overnight. It's reported by the French Coast Guard. It's very, very sad. I don't want anyone to die in these circumstances, although I do think, parents should be prosecuted if they do live for taking children on such a risky journey. And you're in France, you're not desperate. End of. I'm not having it. If you or I did that with our kid, we would be prosecuted. I'm desperately sorry that anyone would die in these circumstances. But I don't know what they're doing getting on these boats in the first place. Now, of course, the passing of this bill, I mean, most people in Britain aren't going to be paying that much attention to this, let alone people living in a tented camp in Calais, or crossing from Africa or somewhere in the Middle East to get to the UK. Is this going to act as a deterrent at all? That's my question.
I mean, it's very hard to judge. I think the big thing that this will depend on is what happens immediately after, insofar as when we hear about one of these first flights, which they reckon is going to be 10 to 12 weeks' time, they say. It's the deadline's been pushed back quite a few times. Are the critics going to be proven right, that it will be jammed up in the courts as a consequence of legal challenges? Are the figures on the right of the Tory party going to be vindicated in their position that because all of the loopholes weren't closed in relation to individual claims and so on, that there is not going to be another situation that we've seen previously where just via lawfare and litigation, flights aren't allowed to take off. And that will then, I think that's the sort of point in which things will really start to crumble.
Well, the Prime Minister's press conference was live during the show yesterday, and, it's 10 to 12 weeks, and he's missed his spring deadline. Now it's July, blaming Labour for that delay. But you could just argue that the bill isn't very well worded. Look, we're going to be talking a little later in the show to the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, who said, openly, this bill isn't going to work. We've had Robert Jenrick, who was the Immigration Minister previously. The bill isn't going to work. It's not going to make a difference. 50 million quid has to be paid to the Rwandan government as soon as this becomes law, on top of the around 300 million already paid. It's going to end up costing a lot more than that. Max, we're looking at 500 people being sent, if they ever do get off the ground. But there are challenges, legal challenges, case by case. We know those are going to continue. And there's even going to be a challenge by the FDA union on behalf of senior civil servants. They're going to call for a judicial review about senior civil servants being forced to break international law. I mean, this is never going to end unless we're outside of the European Court of Human Rights. But I still don't think this policy would still make a difference, do you?
Not at all. I think the government have shown that they're not willing to do what is necessary in order to properly take control over our borders. And this is something which has been demonstrated through this debate. They know that really they probably don't have enough time, even if they wanted to do that, but nevertheless haven't really shown the mettle to properly open that question. They're fearful that it would send the wrong message to the right kind of people, I suppose. And there has always been this contradiction, which is that Sunak's Tory party say they want to stop the boats. They recognise that this is a genuine electoral open wound for them. But at the same time, they're petrified of looking bad in front of the kind of dinner party set. And that's always been the kind of
this comes up a lot on the show. A lot of people say, like, oh, stop going on about it. Genuinely, this is the concern a lot of the people who are in charge of this country and have power over us are concerned about. It's just being a nice person, not being a nasty, horrible bigot who doesn't think that we should allow, you know, hundreds of thousands, as it would be if there weren't any measures at all, of people just to come and make their life in this country. You know, young men from where we don't know, and they're all nearly almost entirely young men as well.
And when you know, maybe we should retire the dinner party cliche. These things can get a bit overused, but you hear it in how they discuss this particular issue. They say, what message would it send? The Tories don't genuinely think that if they leave the European Court of Human Rights, we're suddenly coming to descend into dictatorship and dystopia. They're just worried about what it would look like on the international stage. The international
But they're already embarrassed by it. These are the people who are embarrassed by us having Brexit, because that suddenly means that we are a backward nation. I mean, we're anti-science, we're anti-democracy, we're anti-everything. These are people who genuinely think that being in a corrupt, bureaucratic, unaccountable, you know, a body which dictates goodness knows what to the people and ignores democratic votes and just sucks up money and is corrupt to its very core, that somehow makes us a nice country, as if we had no human rights before the 1970s, as if nothing good had ever come out of Britain. I mean, it's just absurd.